Once again, I'd like to welcome all of you back. I hope you enjoyed lunch in each other's company. I often say this, that post-lunch session is usually a very tough one to crack. Everyone seems to be drifting into sleep, but I'm sure ours will be a very interactive session indeed. Our panel discussion on Fast Forward, overcoming the tides of change and building a scalable and sustainable business. Let's put our hands together as I welcome on the dais our moderator for the same, Mr. Chetan Mahajan, Managing Director, MSL Group. Let's put our hands together as I request Mr. Mahajan to join us on the dais. Welcome, sir. I'd also like to welcome on stage our panelist, Mr. Vikram Vora, co-founder and CEO, MyDentist.com. Let's put our hands together for the entrepreneur himself. We also have with us Mr. Alok Bansal, co-founder and CFO, Policy Bazaar. Let's make sure that the panelists know that we are still awake. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Ashish Kashyap, founder and CEO, Ibibo.com. Warm welcome to you, sir. We also have with us Greg Moran, co-founder and CEO, Zoom Cars. Once again joining us on stage, Mr. Manish Mandhana, Managing Director, Mandhana Industries and Being Human. Again, keeping the same format in mind, we'd like to do about 50 minutes of panel discussion and give about 10 minutes for an interactive session. And now I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Mr. Mahajan, all yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know this is the toughest session and we'll have to keep you awake. And I couldn't have asked for a better panel to keep your adrenaline going. So we have very panel here, and is it consistent? So we'll keep actually a little more time for Q&A because I understand most of us will have specific questions for these speakers. But to begin with, what I'm suggesting is that we will allow each of the speakers to spend maybe about 5 minutes and talk about their businesses, because all these 5 people are fairly successful entrepreneurs. And today when we talk about fast forward, what we really mean is how disruptive can you be in your domain. So if you look at companies like Xiaomi or an Uber or an Airbnb, most of these brands have surpassed the valuation of $25 billion or $50 billion in a little over 5 years. And that's the speed which is absolutely, I think, I would not say essential, but that's the speed which people are looking at from a startup. And unfortunately, when we look at startups, we kind of ignore entrepreneurs who are doing a fantastic job, but they don't fall in the category of a startup. So I would like to start with Ashish, if you can talk about his business, and when he's referring to his business, if you can refer to how he went around doing the innovation, how he scaled up the business, the funding for his business, and the sustainability of his business.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Apologies for the post-lunch session. Hope it's going to be interesting. So the way I built this business was unlike many instances. It was done through a lot of trial and error. So a couple of years ago, I created an incubator where I basically incubated lots of ideas. And just like any incubator, you see lots of failures. But amongst those failures, we started seeing lots of successes. So at that moment of time, what was born was Go Ibibo, one of the entrants in the online travel aggregation space, much later than Make My Trips and the Clear Trips and the Yatras of the world. So we launched the product in 2010 with a simple solution to the problem of delivering a fast user experience on one hand, and on the other hand, delivering you or returning your money if you cancel your travel or your schedule, because there is almost 20 to 30% of people who make a travel booking, 20 to 30% of them actually cancel. So with a very simple premise, we launched this product, which got traction very quickly because it was a significant problem being solved, which was not being solved by the incumbents. And from there on, we basically started developing tools which not only solve the problem of you, the travelers, people like you and me, who make hotel bookings or make flight bookings, but solving the problems even also of the supply. So today's date, we've gone and brought 35,000 hotels on board by giving them huge amount of technologies and tools. Think of technologies like the way you use Google Analytics as a webmaster. Similar kind of tools we've given to the hotel owners, where they get to know how is their performance versus their neighboring competitor. They get to know what is it that they have to do to make that extra 100,000 rupees in a particular week. So we've gone further by actually giving these people technologies like property management systems, central reservation systems, payments, booking engines. So the way we thought of solving this problem during this journey was to build two-sided marketplace. During this journey, we also took on board India's largest bus ticketing business, which is Red Bus. I'm sure you all are familiar, which today's date has a market share of 80%. And again, in this particular platform too, we said we just don't want to solve the problem of you, the traveler, but also solve lots of issues with the owners of the buses. Today's date, for example, we can tell a bus owner what is his profit per bus. We can enable a bus owner to track his bus and figure out what the efficiency is. And as a result, we basically said that, look, we want to really solve transportation and accommodation problems and connect that to travelers. And as a result, a quarter ago, we launched a car sharing application, city-to-city car sharing application, which is again gaining a lot of momentum. In our entire ecosystem, we also now enable thousands of mom and pop shops to become e-agents, as another example. So over this period of time, we've created an ecosystem with today's date the largest hotels engine in the country, multiple times the size of any of the names that you heard over the last 10 years, the largest bus ticketing business, and also the largest payments business, and of course building a couple of other startups in the ecosystem. When it comes to the future, I think clearly today's date, what worries me is not the current competitors. What worries me is the competitors that we can't see, the inventories which are actually not visible, applications which are being developed by some very young people coming out of institutes. So from a future perspective, I think the thing that I need to keep thinking, and the thought that I'll leave you all with, is that I need to think, I have to disrupt my own business, which is very, very hard, right? So for example, if you look at our bus ticketing business, which is almost like pooling a bus between Bangalore to Chennai, the reason for us to actually launch car sharing between a place A to B was almost to think that can we, what would disrupt our own business? So that's, I think, the first theme. Then the second theme really from a future perspective is mobile, and not just porting the desktop experience to mobile, but seeing how do we leverage the real power of mobile, be it location, be it social graph, address books, context, and so on and so forth. And the last most important part, as I see the future, is going to be artificial intelligence, which is going to be really changing the game. So I'm sure if you guys were to meet me 5 years from now, our business will look very, very different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Ashish, did you seek help from venture capitalists for this journey?
Yeah, look, I mean,
how did it go about?
Yeah, so we started as an incubator, and at that time I got the funding. And I think if your question is that what is the methodology, right? So there are different.
How do you choose, because fortunately today there are many people who are willing to fund the startups. So how do you choose the right partner?
Yeah, look, I think the choice has to be made based on what is, besides the color of money, which is green, besides money, what is the incremental value a supplier of money is going to bring to the table, right? At the end of the day, you know, the business that you're creating is a marketplace. It's basically on one hand, and it's multiple-sided marketplace. On one hand, you have suppliers. of raw material, goods, products, inventory. On the other hand, you have buyers, and then on another hand, you have partners, and on the other hand, you have suppliers of money, right? So I think all of these pieces of the puzzle in the ecosystem need to kind of get into a threshold. And you need to think through that aspect as you try to start making choices of finding the right investors into your business. Having said that, the context of raising money is very different, right? So someone like me who had built businesses in the past, I would have a different context from a guy who's coming from an IIT, 25-year-old guy who's building the business for the first time. He'll have a different journey to take, or a guy who's actually pivoting from another industry will have another journey to take. So one has to customize the strategy on fundraising based on at what journey is the person in.
Thank you so much, Ashish. So with this, I'll move to actually the youngest of the entrepreneurs we have with us, Greg. So Greg, you've been in India for about 3.5 years.
That's right.
And your experience would be very different from the experience which Ashish has had being a serial entrepreneur. And you were actually, working in Bangalore with a consulting company, and then you moved on to start up your own business. So how do you see your journey, and what are the learnings which you would like to share with the audience?
Sure. So yeah, for me, I mean, the first question where before anyone really, someone just looks at me and say, why? So why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing? And just to kind of take a step back from that and just give a little bit more context. So for me, I'm initially from New York, but I actually, when I graduated, so going at school, I actually studied India from more of like an economic, political, historical perspective. And I had a lot of good buddies from here. I was studying in Philadelphia at the time. And it was something where I always knew, I sort of, at that point, this was 2006, 2007, that was certainly in one of the large bull markets, of course, here for India. And thought that it was incredibly tempting to do something here. At that point, I was 20, 21 years old. Had no clue what that was going to be, of course. But for me, what was always the biggest driving motivator, really more than anything that you study, quote unquote, in the school or do maybe in your first job, but I was always more motivated by sort of making a larger scale environmental impact. And so that was something from my early days in New York, but thinking and looking out to the rapid pace of growth and development in India, that was something even in school that I thought, well, this is a really large challenge, and I think it's obviously particularly contextualized today in Delhi with what we're seeing with the governmental rulings. But that was something which was always very much top of mind for me, even back then. And so fast forwarding a bit, I came at it, my background was actually in finance, in investment banking, private equity, so we build all these models and do work with large partners, and we actually had an office here in India, and we did a lot of deals here within renewable energy, within larger scale infrastructure finance, and I was very sufficiently jaded after about a year doing that, because doing anything within the energy or power space in India is extremely onerous. It takes years and years. It takes 10 years, sometimes 20 years to do something meaningful because of sort of the bureaucratic tussles that take place over land, over permitting, etc. So I said, well, why not try to do something that's extremely impactful on the environmental side, but where you wouldn't really have to worry about dealing with all the sort of horrible sort of shenanigans of the government that you have within the energy and power space. And so thought about the real sort of fundamental challenges that were around sort of sustainable infrastructure and development as it related to the cities. And so thinking about city challenges, as someone who comes from one of the larger cities in the world, New York, realizing that one of the core problems that you sort of see across all these very large cities is one around car ownership. And the fact that fundamentally people, especially in sort of that 18 to 35 demographic, really don't want to own cars, don't want to have that headache of day in, day out owning a car in a very large city that's very densely populated and has other modes for sort of day-to-day transport consumption. And that was sort of the starting presupposition for our business, and this was back in 2011, 2012. So I actually spent several months here on the ground, traveling, roaming around from city to city, talking to thousands of people to really sort of understand sort of the root problem that was currently present. And for us, one of the fortunate things, and again, I'm sure a lot of the panelists will speak about sort of competition and how that plays into the business. But for us, it's always nice when you can start a business without anyone in it, where no one was thinking about it, and really it's a total white space. And that was, fortunately for us, that was the case. And in early 2013, when we launched, the only players who were doing anything related to self-drive car rental, which is what we do today, we're guys, we're very, very small mom and pop type shops, the kind of onesie twosie places that you would see in Goa or maybe Pondicherry or maybe Jaipur. So it was not something where anyone had brought to bear any sort of technological expertise. No one had thought about sort of operational systems and processes and scale to serve multiple cities and really serve the customer with technology solutions, like obviously having a really simple, clean, robust mobile app. So that was just totally off the radar in our space. And that was something which made it exciting, but also challenging, because for us, when you're sort of making a market from scratch, I mean, our business in some iterations had been done and sort of conquered, if you will, in China, in South America, Europe, in North America, in the US and Canada, but it hadn't been tackled at all in India. And so we really had to very much localize and develop a very customized market model for India. And it's something which we've evolved and tweaked it with each city that we've entered slightly. But that's something where, since we didn't have competition, we were able to sort of build sort of what I'll say sort of in the right customer mindset way from the very beginning, where we weren't sort of forced to run out the gates and do something to quickly chase and catch up to someone. So I think that's why we kind of went about it in a very different way. And so we were very sort of deliberate in how we sort of hired and how we deployed products. And for us, since we're a very operationally intensive business, so we serve customers every single day with an asset that's worth 5 lakh, 10 lakh, 30 lakh in some cases. People are literally, in some instances, in many instances, putting their lives in our hands by actually driving a car, a machine that they don't know. And so really what that means is customer experience has to be king. And for me, the biggest learning is when we started with 7 cars in 2013, so today we have about 2,000 cars across 7 cities. The biggest thing and the toughest challenge has actually been maintaining the sort of consistently stellar customer experience at each inflection point. And for us, that means so thinking organizationally and really to quote what Ashish mentioned, kind of disrupting yourself. But I think that also means not just from a business model perspective, but also from an organizational structure perspective, which is an important point that I don't think people can really appreciate. And I think a lot of times when you talk to investors, they may not appreciate that also. But what works from an org chart level at 15 people, 50 people, 100 people, it's not going to necessarily scale, and you have to be constantly tweaking that, particularly when you're in an operationally intensive business. It's not like if we're doing a B2B SaaS business, it may look a little different. But since we are facing the customer at so many inflection points, it's really important to focus on that. And that's something for me where I focus a lot of my bandwidth on. So I mean, to kind of wrap up, to think about for us over the next 3 to 5 years, where we see this going is a place where we're really looking to move and kind of go from around 2,000 cars to probably scaling that close to 50 times over the next 3 to 4 years. But it's about enabling people in different ways to think about how else they can use the service and make it sort of more contextually relevant. So I think that means adding a lot of services. Like recently we were able to sort of pioneer around a doorstep delivery of a car. So within just a matter of minutes you can actually have a car delivered to your doorstep. Other major innovations are certainly things around the flexibility of pick up and drop off and being able to share and collaborate within the sort of community, and sort of that is really, when you think about convenience, flexibility, that's what we're all about building. So over the next 3, 4, 5 years, our heads are going to be down focusing on the customer ease and customer experience.
Thank you so much, Greg. And with what's happening in Delhi, I think people would need you more than ever. But one more question for you before I move forward is, with respect to choosing the right co-founder or right investor, how important is that? And when it comes to investors love a business model which has been successful in the West, and they're looking for partners who can replicate that model in India. So you think it was easier for you, if you have already raised some money, to convince the investors that this is a model which is successful in the other parts of the world and it's going to be a success here as well?
Yeah, so it's tough. It's an interesting question. I'll just focus on the investment side of that question and not the co-founder side. But it's something where, coming from the U.S., certainly, and coming from finance in particular, I was fortunate where I had sort of a lot of friends and family, so to speak, and a lot of ex-colleagues who really understood the global markets and understood that certain models, again, there's tends to be oversimplifications a lot of times, particularly in the US and Europe, where they think, you can just sort of copy paste something. That's obviously not the case, as I think all of us in this room know. But for us, what was still nonetheless very helpful was that people really intrinsically believed that a lot of the models, a lot of what was going on in the US and Europe could still work in India and China and other emerging economies. And so for us, actually the US guys and the European guys were very much willing to come in and take a bet early on and say, look, I'm confident that this actually can be done, and even if maybe it's not say a $5 billion opportunity, maybe it's 15, 20% of that, but for them they still viewed that as meaningful, meaty, basically significant enough so that they get behind it. Now with the VCs though, the Indian VCs and private equity investors and other folks, I think they had certainly at least early on, a much more skeptical lens around it, where I think certainly looking at consumer behavior, looking at their own preconceived notions, thinking about some of the operational logistical challenges that have been tried to been overcome over the last 5 years, I think they definitely had more doubts early, and I think that's why it was really helpful to have the US and European backing. And then over time, once you scale to a certain point, then you hit an inflection point. But it wasn't until then where I think people really sort of got behind and understood that this is something which could be very meaningful and scalable.
Thank you so much, Greg. So with this, I'll move to Manish. Manish has a very interesting business model, works across the entire supply chain. He's a manufacturer, he's a retailer, he's online, he has an online marketplace. So Manish, your business model is very different from what most of the startups would have in this day and age. So how do you scale up your business, and what's so exciting about being in the manufacturing side of the startup vis-a-vis on the aggregation or the application side of the startups?
Afternoon, friends. Actually, I come from a generation of textile family, and we've been into manufacturing for almost 3 decades, and it's a very traditional, conventional business in India, and age-old business, and a lot of employment is generated in that business. Obviously, in the old days, fabrics was the main business. You went to a tailor, you got yourself some clothes stitched, and you went for a trial, and then the market moved, and I entered the business when things were changing rapidly in India, and obviously we got into apparel exports, which was an extension to the manufacturing of textiles. And in 2010, I was a little restless because, of course, business was growing where we were, but I thought India is emerging as a huge potential destination and a huge market for, retail, and retail was exploding in India. There were a lot of failures in the early days in retail, but eventually things started getting corrected, and things started getting in order. And I was looking to do something, extra, and I said, what more can we do, and how can we encash on all the strengths that we have as an organization, and how do we take this business forward? And that's when the idea of creating a brand in India came by, and of course I was looking for that eureka and that unique idea which would be different from others, which would make us different from the competition that's around, because India is a large market with a lot of unorganized sector as well into place, and building brands is not an easy job. You need years of investments, years of hard work and effort, and you're still not sure about the result. And we had to come out with something which was different and which had its own USP, and that's how the idea of Being Human was born, which is a national brand today, and not only national, it's on a global platform. Of course, what I needed to think is how to bring the investment down, how to get quicker results, how to encash the strengths that we have as a country and the dynamism that we have over here, and the strengths we have as an organization. Having worked for the best labels across the globe and doing contract manufacturing for them, interacting them, working with them, gave a lot of insight towards fashion and how things go about in retail. We were purely manufacturers. We never went on the retail side of the business, but we worked with all of them. So I was just watching TV once and I just saw Salman Khan playing a soccer game wearing just a Being Human t-shirt. And it was just a foundation formed by him. There was nothing around it. It was his way of giving it back to the society, and he formed a foundation called Being Human. And it just struck to me that it's such a beautiful name, and it's such a, you can do anything with this name, and it's such a global name. I mean, you can go with this name anywhere and it would make a lot of statement and meaning. So I just approached Salman with a complete business plan. I said, let's make it a social business, let's make it a brand, and let's put in all kind of elements whereby you can support your charity, and also it can become a big name to reckon with, and marry these three propositions of celebrity, charity and fashion and put them together. And nobody's ever done this before, and it could be the unique selling proposition that we have. And somewhere we can touch lives of people, somewhere we can have a great connect with people through this brand and spread the message across, along with doing a healthy business. So that's where the idea was born, and the brand, we always had a very global vision for the brand, that this label, this name can go anywhere in the world, and it does not need only the face of the celebrity, but there's a lot that this brand has to offer. So we put in our expertise of manufacturing and working, and the innovation and design that we have in-house, and we used the power of Salman Khan as a celebrity to showcase the brand, and we added an angle of goodness in the brand by putting a percentage for the purpose of education and healthcare of people. And that's how the brand got instant recognition, because Salman was endorsing it. Once people went to the store and experienced it, they saw a very different environment of the brand. They saw a great quality product. They saw pricing which was at a sweet spot. And all those things worked for us. And obviously when you set up a business, it requires a lot of investment. And how do you scale it up? And you have to think about scalability and working on economies of scale, because that can make you more profitable and more successful and fuel your future growth. If your company is cash rich and if fund flow is good, you can always expand and grow. And we followed an omni-channel marketing strategy for the brand. We sell online, we have standalone stores, we have franchisee model where people come and invest and open stores. We have international tie-ups, and we are available in about 15 countries, right from Europe to Middle East. And we saw the potential, and we knew that unless we don't scale up the business, it will be difficult to sustain and take it forward. And once you get established, then life becomes a lot more easier, and then you can add a lot more categories into your business and grow further. So I think a good business structure and a model requires clutter-breaking ideas, requires very smart marketing efforts, requires a great bunch and great team of people. It requires adequate funding and right partners to back you and support you, and it requires constant innovation. I think these are the key factors to make anything work, and of course a great team and great minds behind it. I think in business there are various areas which need to be taken care, right from human resources to marketing and PR activities to a great research on product quality and design. We are in the business of fashion, and I always look up to guys like Zara. The owner of Zara is one of the wealthiest individual in the world, and how did he make it so big? He made it so big by offering fast fashion to people, offering fast fashion at a reasonable price, and he always engaged the client into coming into his stores again and again, because every time they went into the store they found something new. So it says that at the end of the day, today the loyalty factor in customer is very less. You need to add a lot of technology in your business as well. I think in order to be a successful entrepreneur and having a successful organization, you need to be the best IT company in the world today, because things are moving very fast. You need to adopt to new ways of marketing and innovate even in that. You need to engage a customer. You need to make the person who works in that in your organization feel that he owns the organization and have those kind of values. So if you can build a great business with a strong CSR aspect as well in your business, and can keep your employees and people connected to your business, whether it's your vendors, whether it's your consumer, whether it's your employee, if you can keep them bonded together, I think you can keep moving forward and go ahead.
Thank you so much, Manish. So with this, I'll move to a relatively boring business of insurance. That's how most of us see it, because it's very transactional. And sorry, Alok, I've taken the liberty, but and some of the Pensy calls are also responsible for bringing in this monotony into this business, but it's amongst the toughest business, because you have to constantly educate your consumer and help them understand that they can save a lot of money by drawing that comparison. And it doesn't end there. You have to eventually make sure that the transaction happens from your platform. Otherwise, people take the knowledge from you and they'll consume the services from where they have to consume it eventually. So Alok, you've been running this business for almost like 8 years now. So if you can share with us your experience of scaling up the business, your experience of reinventing this business, because there is a lot of monotony in terms of how you engage with your consumers, and how much did Kapil helped with Babaji Ka Tullu?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So we started this company in June 2008. We thought that it would be a very simple business model, where the marketing model, customers will come, there will be suppliers who are offering those products, there will be handshake happening, and customers will move on to insurance companies' platforms, and eventually transaction happens. We realized our folly very, very early on, within first 3 months, I think, and we saw that the insurance company platforms at that time were not as evolved as we would want them to be, and the sort of final offer of the pricing and the product was not really available. And we had to be very flexible with the business model. We started thinking about, okay, what all we can do to sort of survive for the first few years as we understand more about the domain and build our relationships. So we started working along with the motor insurance product on health insurance and life insurance products, and we saw that there was a requirement by the industry for these inquiries. Really bad business model, because customer experience was very, very bad, and eventually you are not doing anything but arbitrage, where you hope that your marketing costs are less than what you are selling it for. And but it obviously helped us survive those 2-3 years, and we understood a bit about the industry and what are the customer problems and how do we actually work on those problems, and what is the proposition that we'll actually eventually end up being with. So in around 2011 we started moving toward transactions, and over last 3-4 years we have moved 100% toward transactions. So today a person comes to the platform and so transacting. Once the policy issued, we get something from the company. Having said that, it's still not a very simple marketplace model. We have to go much deeper into the whole issue, because see, the first problem there was that the industry was not thinking about customer at all. It was always thinking about distributor. So we have addressed that to some extent, but the second problem was that the basic service levels across companies in the industry, whether you talk about their product thinking, their platform, their processes, they are not aligned for an online pull customer. And generally the industry was not ready to believe that insurance is a product where you can have pull demand. And so again, that's one of the challenges that we are trying to solve, with coming up with different solutions. Now those solutions may be regarding, say, payment gateways, those solutions may be regarding us acting as a surveyor and a TPA with collaboration with someone. We also use obviously mobile as a great enabler, because mobile has these accelerometer, GPS location, so you can use a lot of these services for the claims part, for servicing part. And as Ashish has mentioned, you have to not think only customer, you have to think of suppliers also, and how do you help them? So do you give them better quality of business? Do you give them early intimation of claims so that their frauds can come down? So do you actually work on the whole value chain and help out both suppliers and the customers? So that's the way we have been evolving. We have gone much deeper into the whole thinking of insurance now. We have now started working with insurance companies and trying to use whatever data we have collected over the last 8 years to see what is the right product for this customer. Can companies create a product for a niche customer? Because there is no other way to reach out to a very small segment of a customer. Insurance is a very mass product by nature. immediate, and along with all this, we have started few other product lines, more of experimentation. We'll see how it goes. But few of the things that we have realized over time is that, in transaction models, eventually what you are doing is not very, very different from any other business. You're going through the same challenges. You still have to focus on unit economics. You still have to focus on cash, revenue, collections. You have to still take decisions considering what it means in short term versus long term. So the overall business dynamics don't change that much. It's just that you are online and you have a way of reaching out to customers online. That's the only difference. Otherwise, most of the stuff remains as it is, and that's the hard reality, I would say, actually.
Thank you so much, Alok. Yes, Vikram. So you have a pretty innovative model. So in the last couple of years, you've been able to scale it up from Mumbai. Now you're moving to Bangalore, and again, this is not a very fancy business, but yes, this can be a very profitable business. So your struggles and engagement with your stakeholders, including your consumers and your investors.
So two corrections. A, we are not an online company. I don't own the domain name mydentist.com. Okay, neither do I own the domain name mydentist.in. Okay, we are a pure play brick and mortar company. And the domain that you want to actually go to check the MyDentist website is mydentist.co.in. Okay, but it's okay. I mean, this thing keeps happening to me time and again. And the second thing is that, again, a PR goof up from my PR representative at our office saying that we are one of the very few companies that have done Series C. Every second company does a Series C this year. Okay, so two clarification that I thought I should make. So we are a very, as he said, very uninteresting business. We are basically a chain of dental centers. There are doctors working over there. Patients come, get treated. Period. End of story. Okay, that is basically what we do. Currently, we have around 120 of them. More than 1,250 people working in toto. 500 of them happen to be doctors. What does this mean? Well, where we see it as the largest dental chain in the country. We treat more than 30,000 patients every month. Possibly in terms of company-owned, company-operated setup, we are the largest in Asia. Individually also, we do more treatments than any institute in India. Forget the basic competition of private doctors. Why was this whole idea conceived? Very simple reason. I think that there is a huge, large unserved segment that sits outside, which is basically in between the middle and bottom of the pyramid, that requires dental treatment, does not get dental treatment because of cost, availability, lack of awareness, and that's the problem we went out to solve. We are still trying to solve it. In nowhere even close to even 0.05% of the market share, so a lot of work to be done. As you said, in terms of investors, we have 3 investors on our board. The first investor happened to be our incubator, that is Seed Fund. Seed Fund did 2 rounds. 2013, a fund from Delhi came on board, Asian Healthcare Fund, which is a shootout from the Dabur group. And this year we raised more money from a philanthropy fund called Liechtenstein Venture Philanthropy. So, well, the idea still remains the same, very simple. Provide dental care services and keep making it more and more scalable as we go forward. Currently, I cannot see how I can take it online. So that's a problem that I'm facing.
So when you say, you're struggling to figure out how do you take the business online. So
no, I'm not even trying to do it.
Okay.
It was just a sarcastic comment.
So you think, all the businesses which are making an attempt to bridge the gap between the consumer and the service provider, they do not end up adding too much value, or you want to stay away from that business?
I'm just saying that I can't do it. I can't do it. I have subscribed to aggregators who do that for us. And because there are a lot of us who are looking for these services, so aggregators are very important. And what they help essentially is, they help us take our services to the consumer, Consumer can help us, can find us very easily because of these aggregators. So in fact, I have a lot of respect for them.
Sure. So you would never have an app which will connect your consumers to the doctors?
I find it difficult to find usage for an app because typically statistically in urban India, a person in his entire lifetime goes to a dentist on an average twice, and this is the current statistic, only twice, and that's urban India statistic. Okay. If you take rural India into consideration, the statistic becomes even more worse. So in such a case, and you wouldn't want an app on your phone that tells you that 10 years from now you will be going to a dentist, okay, and when is it that I would want an appointment. So I wouldn't invest in something that that I don't think my consumer wants.
So how do you engage with the consumer, which is, let's say, between the age of 25 and 35, and they're fascinated? I'm talking about the urban consumer for the sake of convenience. They're fascinated with their devices, their screens, and more or less everything they want, whether it is through Urban Clap or through other aggregators. It is their primary point of engagement is that screen. So if we are not present on that screen, how do we still get the attention of this segment of the customer?
So it's a challenge, it's a huge challenge, and we've not yet actually looked very creatively or very innovatively at this particular challenge, because 80% of my revenue comes from people who are above the age of 45. Okay. So people in this segment between up to 35 years typically don't have a dental problem, or have a dental problem that they can procrastinate. So that's the age group when the Combiflam and the Brufens of the world are working. So you typically don't come to us, and when you come to us, the situation is so bad that an app won't help.
That's a very interesting perspective. So Ashish, coming back to you, when you look at from the business from your perspective, why do you think most of the startups gone for valuation rather than creating value?
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of it is basically hyped, essentially, and it's not just the startup actually. Mm-hmm. So what really happens is that typically you get the Series A investor. What he is also looking at is that the value at which he came in should get multiplied very quickly, because when Series B, so let's say Series A you raise at $5 million, right? And let's say the Series A investor owns 33% of that business. Now when the Series B guy comes in at $50 million, even though the Series A guy dilutes, his intrinsic value, or rather his notional value, has suddenly gone up. Okay. And then the same thing happens with the Series B versus Series C versus Series D. Okay. Because typically all of this money, where is this coming from? This money is coming from LPs. There's a fund, right? It's a business, right? And being a fund, they want to definitely communicate that there is value being created very quickly. So I just don't blame the startup or the startup entrepreneur for this, euphoria or unviable euphoria. It's, I think, driven by the investors. It is driven by, the bull runs which happens in markets. Like in China, something is happening. So, for example, the big one is in China, this is what has happened, Taobao, right, as an example. And then everybody starts comparing Taobao to assets here, not realizing that the context in India is totally different. So it's not just the entrepreneur, it's really the environment, which creates that unrealism between actual problems being solved and value being created versus valuation.
So would it be right to say that what happened to the real estate industry in the last 7 years is something which is in parallel to what has happened with the valuations and the investment?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't actually go that drastic, right? Because the one thing which has happened really well, if you're talking about our industry, which is digital technology, internet, is that if this supply of money wouldn't have come in, the behavior for consumers to use smartphones, use internet on smartphones wouldn't have happened. it needed that shake-up, right? Unlike China or unlike US or Russia or any other market where, penetration of internet tracked nicely with the GDP growth rate and the evolution of the society really. In India, that was not happening. So in India, what had to happen was that you almost basically you were supposed to give money to individuals and say, hey, take 100 rupees, try shopping on the site. Take 50 rupees, try this, right? And then the person saying, yeah, okay, that's the value, and now.
That still happens, Ubers and Olas of the world were doing until last quarter.
Because it's not just, in fact, in case of Uber and Ola, it's creating the two sides of the market, right? It's really educating not just me, the passenger, to stop driving my own car. It's that education, and the second education is going to the neo-literate drivers to use technology, right? And that evolution is very different from many markets, right? So I don't think it's like real estate, because I think technology does solve significant problems. Hence, in the longer term, I think all of this is going to be not talked about, because I think there is going to be a lot of value. We're right now talking 200 and 250 million internet users, and roughly 60 to 70 million smartphone users, and roughly 30 to 40 million people making a purchase. I think at 200-300 million people making a purchase using internet, we're talking about a very, very massive market. We're talking about a $200 to $300 billion market, which is very sizable. And clearly, if we see the real economics, I think offline world in our country is inefficient, because in the offline world you're using large real estates, and real estates in our country is inefficient. They have large black economies in there. So I think online will always beat the inefficiencies of the offline world. I can take any business model, from that point. I mean, if you look at, there's Meru. Meru is an offline business.
Yep.
The cab driver would go from place A to B, and then will go from B to C empty. I think that's exactly the problem which Uber solved, right? Basically, which is that the cab driver wouldn't be empty.
The idle capacity.
And would get frequency. That's how technology was used, right, basically. So I can take thousands of such examples, right? Like, for example, classifieds is now bigger online than in the offline world, right? So I think at the current moment there's euphoria, there's madness, and just like any forest where there is going to be a fire, which will lead to creative destruction, which will lead to some people to flourish but lots to die. That's part of the evolution of the market.
Thanks, Ashish. Very nice perspective. So, Greg, one question for you before we open the house for questions. So, in your business, how do you bring in innovation? Because there's a product and you have a customer. You either bridge them through a website or a call center or a application. So, how do you constantly bring innovation and disruption in your business to make sure that somebody will not replace your business with another application?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really salient question. I think for us, as really a hyper-local service provider, the most important thing, and I'm sure everyone hears this a lot, is you really have to actually be talking to your customers constantly, and you really have to solicit and go out and have that feedback. And for us, we actually are structured, so we're based in Bangalore as a company, but we have operating hubs in 7 different cities. We have small local teams. We have a sort of city manager, an operations manager, a marketing manager, basically a 3-team unit, and these guys will go and constantly be engaging with the end consumer. And we do a lot of community building engagement with other sort of local businesses and other sort of tangentially related services. So we engage constantly with universities, with corporates, corporate IT parks, with other places such as shopping malls, cinema halls, where our customers are, and where we can actually aggressively sort of engage and have these dialogues. So we really understand where the pain points are, and you do this in an offline fashion, but you also do it in an online fashion, and so you kind of look at productizing that feedback as much as you can. And I think you see all the great e-commerce companies here today do that, but whether that's on the app, whether that's on the website, whether it's through email, SMS, push notification, it's really important that you're collecting these data points and you're asking the right types of questions, and you're constantly being introspective and really sort of diving down deep into that data and understanding, and make it such that it becomes a very sort of cross-company horizontal activity. I think too often you'll find that it can be sort of thinking about the dynamic innovation and the disruption, and thinking about, you often get it that siloed and say that's the domain of the product team, let's say, or maybe that's the marketing team that'll think about these things. But what's really important, and this is a struggle that we face all the time, and we certainly haven't perfected it, but it's having the operations team, it's having the product team, having the analytics team, having the technology team, having all of these different teams, constantly in touch with this data, because that's ultimately what will tie everyone together and sort of get people to flourish and have these ideas bubble up, to think about how we're going to take that next leap and make the consumer lives a lot better.
Thank you so much, Greg. Yes, so the house is open for questions now, and you can actually point the question to a specific speaker as well, please.
My question is for Ashish. Thank you, very insightful session. There's a terminology that you're referring, disruptive change. Is there any step-led strategy to this? How do we comprehend this?
Is there?
Disruptive change.
Yeah.
Now that's very interesting. So, how, is there any step-led strategy on this one? When do I know it's time for a disruptive change? And is there a formula?
Yeah, I think you hear it from your customers, and you don't hear it through actually data. You hear it through patterns on one hand, and then you basically figure through trial and error. So what really happens is a lot of companies get tired doing trial and error, experimentation. They get so caught up with their day-to-day tasks that they just totally stop doing any experimentations and trial and error as they read those patterns, and that's why they get disrupted. That's why they are basically caught like sitting ducks. So I think the key thing, at least that I have seen during my journey, and I could also get, to be honest, disrupted, is that you just keep trying and erroring, and just keep figuring out the sweet spots. And the minute you basically see those patterns pervading, then you basically attack. You've got to be always in momentum.
Can you give us an example in your context?
Yeah, look, I mean, we are the best example, right? Because disruption necessarily doesn't need to happen, by creation of a new value, right? You could improve a value curve totally. So in my in my example, the way we built the accommodation business was through a lot of trial and error. Our mainstay was air ticketing, then we got into bus ticketing. These were our mainstay businesses, but we were beginning to see this pattern that consumers are traveling from city A to B, but they're not buying accommodation. They're buying it offline. So what is the problem? And then we had to do a lot of trial and error. We actually brought that entire industry online. But to do that also we had to go through 50 different methodologies, and once we brought that, then there was also the buyer side problems which we had to solve. So it was a constant trial and error, and then basically we started seeing in certain hyper locations the magic effect happening, what I call it as the network effects taking off, right? And once that happens, we believe the industry has happened basically.
Thanks, Ashish. Yes, please. There's a gentleman, there's a lady at the last table. Yeah. Sorry, you're not loud enough.
My question is for Mr.
thank you.
Alok Bansal. The business you are in requires a lot of trust, because it's insurance. You don't require it today, you require it probably a year later, 2 years later, and you keep reinsuring yourself. How did you ensure the trust is built within you and your customers?
So if I understand you right, you are asking about how do you build the trust in the customer, especially in a category like insurance, right?
Right.
Perfect. See, the main thing is, if you look at the whole value chain, if you look at where all the friction is there for the customer, and how do you actually help out customers remove those friction points. Now, as I said, a lot of friction, eventually if you look at just insurance, what is insurance? Insurance is nothing but the buying of a promise that in case there is a claim in future, you will get something. Now, if you are thinking about what customer actually wants to buy and solving customer problem and not thinking about what you are going to get out of it, first of all, you have given him the right product which suits his needs. The second part would be how do you then enable the actual delivery of that product. Now, in our case, the product was promised, so the actual proof the pudding is in the claim. So then how do you actually participate in the claim process or the service process? And in insurance, typically again, at the time of claim, people are in distress, so they don't carry a insurance copy with them. So then how do you ensure that they have access to data, they have access to the right services that are required? So if I live in Gurgaon, I know cashless garage, cashless hospitals in Gurgaon, but suppose I am 200 kilometers away, what do I do? So can GPS tell me within 10 kilometers of my location right now, which are the cashless garages, cashless hospitals? Can I connect them to towing services? Can I connect them to ambulance services? All that stuff. Can I file claim immediately? Now that sort of stuff obviously starts building those trust factors for the customers. Also, when customers have any issue in the whole process of buying also, the sort of proactiveness that you can show to resolve those issues. So in our case, we don't control the whole process. A lot of process is managed at the insurance company's end. But if you're proactive in your communication and if you are there for the customer, and if even in the middle of the night there is a mail which is responded by someone senior, or the customer's trust starts getting built up over time. And then you obviously start tracking those things to see whether these things are actually working or not working. So you track NPS, you track what sort of complaint mails are coming, if they are coming, then for what factors they are coming, how to resolve those complaints. So it's a long journey. You can't build a trust in a very, very short while. I think it's taken us so long for the last 7-8 years. In fact, there was a very recent AC Nielsen study where they checked the most trusted insurance brands in India. And even though we are not an insurance company, we came out second most trusted insurance brand in India. So that takes some time and effort, that's all.
Thank you so much, Alok. Is somebody in this middle table? Sorry, I'll come to you. Yes, please.
So my question, I think,
just one sec. Mic is getting to you.
Because among all the panelists, I think he's the only one on the product side. Rest all are more on the service side. And I myself, I own a brand called FNS, and we make spoons, forks, and knives. We are the #1 brand in the country. We started about 10 years back. And the challenge which we face now is what next? Like, we are the #1 brand, and what more do I innovate in cutlery? It's a 6-inch spoon handle. We've tried whatever we could, and now we got stuck at a point. What more to innovate? So maybe if you can help me on that.
I think you are in the business where you have to be in every household, and of course there's a lot of competition again. So at the end of the day, you need to visit a lot of exhibitions across the globe which are specifically for those kind of products, and see what people are doing and how they are innovating. And you have to keep bringing back the new ideas. Maybe you have to present it in a different way, you have to package it in a different way, you have to market. I think what we lack in India is marketing.
Innovation and marketing.
Innovation and marketing is something, we have to learn from the Americans, honestly. If you walk into a Disney park and you take all your rides and you spend your day, or every ride that you take, and as you're walking out, they have a store right there. Because you've just experienced that, and suddenly if you go through a store which has products with that experience, you connect with it, and it's an impulse buy. So I think what is very important is how you recreate the magic of representing your product every time in a different way. And eventually, that's what makes all the difference. I think it's how you package it, how you market it, and how you promote it.
Thank you so much, Manish. Yes, please.
Hi, Manish. I am again coming back to you. That's here. So my question to you is this, that you have the most fit guy who we know in India as as a person endorsing your brand. That's Salman himself, right? So do you look at any extended product line in gym wear, fitness wear coming up?
That's a great question. As I said earlier, that Being Human is a name which can go on any product, and it can work. So obviously we started with men's wear, then we added women's wear. Now we are launching boys wear in February along with active wear, and that's called Being Active, because we are one of the youngest nations in the world. Fitness has become a way of life, and obviously there are big giant players like Puma, Reebok, Adidas, Nike who we have to compete, but they are not really cheap. They are quite dearer. They have a strong aspirational value, plus their products are very scientifically made based on the kind of workout you are engaging yourself into. So we've studied that very deeply, and I think in middle of Feb we are launching our line called Being Active. it's only activewear for the youth. So we will be extending a lot of other products in this brand. We are adding shoes, we are adding fragrances, we are adding sunglasses. Sky's the limit. But everything related with lifestyle, because we've created a certain aspiration around the brand and we want to stick to its DNA.
Great, so I think your marketing person should reach out to us.
Surely.
We'll definitely look for some tie-up in the time to come. Because actually Indian market is so completely filled with just, the Nikes and Reeboks of the world. Somebody from India needs to get into this space and really make a difference.
No.
So look forward to that.
We've actually made a mark. If you ask me, we are one of the only Indian apparel brand which has a presence across the globe.
Yeah.
And we are only growing. We were to launch the brand in Selfridges, which is one of the most iconic stores in the world, as much as last year, but because of Salman's issues, he could not travel there and he had to be present for the launch. So very soon we'll be there. So I think we are quite proud to say that we've achieved quite a lot in a short span of time.
Absolutely,
Sure.
about
Thank
3.5 years,
Yeah,
17 countries, and of course,
we have 700 point of sales globally already.
Time for one last question. Okay, I'll come to that table. 2 questions very quick.
My question is to Vikram. Vikram, when you started, how many outlets you had in the beginning? How the journey started? My question is, how you built up your team, how you ensured that each outlet was profitable, how you ensured that there were no pilferages at each doctor's level, so how the business grew?
Yeah, I mean, as a company, we are in the only way we can scale up is by putting more number of centers, right? I mean, I have a center which is a standard model. We just have 2 chairs in the center. We can only accommodate X number of people to treat. So we have a question of limitation in terms of capacity. That's what I think Mr. Sanjeev was talking about. So that's something that we have to live with. Now with that, the only way we can scale up is if we are able to put n number of centers in n number of cities across the country, and if we want to have that kind of scalability, there are 2 things that we started off right from the beginning. One, that we will be independent of individuals. That is, irrespective of who is the person who's treating you, the quality of care and the standardization of care would be absolutely perfect and the same across all our outlets, across all our doctors. To do that, we did a lot of standardization, process improvements, trainings, etc., etc. And the second important thing that we realized for scale was independence of geographies. Okay, in a model like us, and which is a service model across multiple geographies through smaller outlets, which could be retail, which could be service, which could be healthcare. You need to have standardization of service, and that standardization can only happen if you have independence from these 2 parameters. One is individuals and second is geography. And everything that we do revolves around that. Everything that we do. I mean, I don't know if I've answered the question. Yeah.
Do we have time for one question or should we let it go?
So one final.
Okay, good. Thank you. My question is to Ashish and Manish. Since you are having a disruptive startup and yours is not very formal, right? So you would have a lot of people who join you from different industries, not very related experience, right? Education-wise, they could be different, young boys and girls, women. So when you have such diverse workforce and you have a vision, how do you really assimilate people with this diversity of talent that you get? And how do you really measure inclusion that they're really being part of it? So more like a hygiene question to the 2 of you.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a toughest one, right?
Yeah.
It is really tough, but there are a couple of things we do. First and foremost is a lot of communication. So, for example, our brand in one of my businesses, which is Go Ibibo, our brand, what it stands for, it also needs to stand for an internal culture. So it's all about execution. So our latest campaign line is Go Kar De. The prior one was Done, which is all about execution. So we ensure that we don't confuse so many people with, let's say, I have like 20 vision points and 30 mission points. Everybody should understand basically 2 or 3 things. So number one is, what does the brand stand for? And the other is 2 metrics that we have, everyone understands, numerical metrics. First is a metrics called Net Promoter Score. Everybody understands NPS. If not, you can Google it. It's pretty easy to understand. Every individual, whether it's a customer care agent or it is a product management director, chases Net Promoter Score because that's an organizational wide phenomena. And the last one is conversion rates. So if we look at conversion rates every hour, and we have screens across our company where everyone can see our conversion rates. If conversion rates are disturbed, that means there's something wrong. It could be a service problem, it could be a technology problem. So everybody knows it's about execution. We basically say execution is greater than an idea, Net Promoter Score and conversion rates. And last but not the least, just like the way we do NPS with the customers, we also do NPS with our teams. Are they willing to promote our company to others to join us? And that helps us to learn and course correct all the time. For example, in our latest NPS survey, we heard that the food in our cafeteria is horrible, right? And that really comes out of that, and then we are able to course correct. So that's how we basically manage diversity, to keep it simple.
Thank you, Ashish.
We are obviously in the business of fashion, so we need a lot of youth to be a part of our business. I think they're bursting with ideas. All they need is a little bit of direction and guidance. And we literally, we tie up with a lot of fashion schools and colleges where youth want to participate and be a part of the brand. And it's an open platform. We are almost like an institute in our company. We give them a lot of opportunities to, throw their ideas, and it's like we literally throw them in the well and tell them how to swim. I think that's the best way to learn. And unless you don't get your hands dirty, you can't learn. And everything comes with a cost, obviously, but there are mentors within the company who are always supervising them and managing them. But I think the power of youth is very, very strong in our country. I think they have great ideas, and especially in a business of fashion, if we don't infuse talent every now and then, we'll get very boring. We need to keep ourselves exciting, and there's a healthy sense of competition that's around. We also give a lot of opportunities to physically challenge people to work in our stores. Each of our store employs one or two, specially abled people, so that, and believe me, I mean, they have a lot more talent than the normal guys also, because life is a great leveler, right? If you don't have something, you get something. So they are very talented people, and that number is going to grow in a brand like us. And at the end, we have to stick to what we believe in, and we have to do activities around our brand which are true to its DNA. So I would say we are a very socio-ecological brand. A large part of our production is organic cotton, so we are looking at the environment side of it, and obviously we are employing people with special abilities, and there is a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. Many people can build great businesses, but there is a purpose in our business.
Thanks, Manish. So I know we are now far ahead of our schedule. So I'll quickly sum it up. I think for each of the entrepreneurs here, the basic trigger motivation was to solve a problem. So they were not a solution finding a problem. They were people who were actually looking at real problems and then finding a solution to solve those problems. Secondly, to build efficiencies in the system, because that's the real value add which an entrepreneur can actually bring in. Then couldn't agree more with each one of them, particularly Ashish, that you have to continue to be disruptive. The disruption is the only constant we have today. We have to disrupt our own business, specifically when it is doing really well, because that's the time you can actually get enamored that you are great and you'll keep going great. Then business model has to be sound, and if it is not sound, I think we have to continue to do hit and trial and figure out what's the best business model we have. Moving on to the most crucial ingredient, I think it's the passion. So you would have seen the passion in all these 5 gentlemen here. And if you are able to marry your passion with the purpose, be it charity, be it celebrity, or be it sustainable development, I think then you have a fundamentally workable model which your investors and your stakeholders will buy. And of course, you have to constantly create value for all your stakeholders, whether it is your investors, your employees. You have to occasionally make them co-owners so that they have a very strong vested interest in the growth of the business, and of course your partners. So if you are able to bring all these things together, there would be very few reasons why you would not succeed as an entrepreneur. With this, I would like to thank Ashish, Alok, Vikram, Greg, and Manish. Thanks for your patience as well.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Mahajan, for really summing it up so well and making this an interactive session. I'd like to request Deepa Tripathi from ETH to once again join us on stage and thank our moderator as well as all our panelists. And like I said earlier, in case any of you haven't got a chance to ask any questions now, you're more than welcome to do it offline. For now, let's welcome Deepa on stage with your applauses. Deepa, why don't we start with Mr. Kashyap? Thank you so very much. Has been a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Mr. Vora. I'd also like to thank Mr. Mahajan, our moderator. Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. And let's capture the moment with a group picture, sir. Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, all of you.